Today's guest on the Winning Teams podcast is the extremely interesting Jeremie Kubicek. Now, Jeremie is the CEO of an organization called Giant, which is basically a massive scalable development platform that is an SAS platform and is available to other people to dip into. And Jeremie talks a little bit about that in the interview, but it really is fascinating, and there will be a link in the show notes that you can go and dig in there. But Jeremie has really been at the kind of the cutting edge in terms of technology and the whole developmental space, and for organizations and for individuals. And if you're a leader who in the current climate is challenged about how you actually manage and lead your team remotely, then Jeremie has got some great advice, has also got great pointers for you in terms of how you develop a language that helps you to communicate effectively and helps you to lead the team and also lead the development and growth of that team. If you are a leader and you're wondering why it is that, organizations and you perhaps hire potential good leaders, but then don't necessarily see the result of those hires as they develop into leaders, then Jeremie again has an awful lot to say about that, about how we should need to go about developing that potential in our organizations. And if you're wondering about, very often the often heard comment is that I really want to change the mindset of the people in my team, then Jeremie also has a lot to say on that subject. So this is just a fantastic interview, fascinating work that Jeremie and his organization have done. And this would be a real asset to you to listen to right now, and also to explore the platform beyond that. If you're looking for other really good interviews, we've got some great podcasts on the site www.johnmurphyinternational.com. Go there and really have a look through. But in the meantime, sit back and listen to the very, very interesting Jeremie Kubicek. Jeremie, you're very welcome on the Winning Teams podcast. I'm really thrilled that you took the time to come here and share your wisdom with us.
So good to be here. I love talking about all things leadership, and I'm grateful for what you do.
No, listen, it's fantastic. You're a CEO of a company called Giant, which is actually a rather interesting company, and you refer to it as kind of a scalable development platform. Can you maybe just explain what that is, who it's for, and what it does?
Yeah, we basically figured out that in the 21st century world of high tech and high touch, that the digital age leaders were really transitioning from a 20th century leader development to the 21st century. So for us, that's a culmination of personality, we call it PQ, emotional intelligence, and leadership skill. And the combination of all of those wrapped up in the 21st century reality of remote, agile, scalable work. And what's happening right now is the death of a lot of 20th century things coming crashing right into the rocks, and the 21st century hyper-personal technology occurring. As we created a SaaS business model, a platform, a tech model that enables leaders to learn things in a 21st century way, not the 20th century training style.
So it really is there to be utilized by organizations like my own and plenty of others.
Companies and or coaches, and we're a wholesaler. We partner with coaches. We work directly with companies. It's designed to teach people how to scale leader development with common language, visual tools. We just found that most adults are cynical know-it-alls, and they watch, they don't read. And so therefore there's a lot of change in the air, and we've been doing this for a number of years, and we feel like we're ready for the season that's afoot.
Okay, I love what you're doing in that space. I'm interested in that because I gather from reading about your stuff, there was a kind of a pivot moment for you in terms of as you refer to it, you kind of change your philosophy. And I'm just curious, or nosy perhaps, as to what your philosophy was and what it changed to and why.
Well, I kind of have two pivot points. I'll be really quick. The first one was in 2002. My wife and I went to Cancun. We got stuck in a hurricane. A hurricane was visiting the same time as we were. That's probably why the prices were so cheap in September in Cancun. Anyway, and so there was a storm going on. And while the storm was going on, we were trying to get to our hotel, and we were hit by a drunk driver. And it crushed me, paralyzed, a number of things that happened to me, and that changed me. Now I'm not paralyzed now. I had all types of crazy things that went on. The point is that was a storm. There was a storm, and then there was a storm. There was two storms happening at the same time, which a lot of leaders right now, there is a storm, and then there's a storm that they're dealing with. And it changed the way that I viewed people. And I probably saw people as a liability before, and I probably saw, hey, I'm just going to do what I need to do to make it and get to the top. And I started viewing people as assets. I started being grateful for people. So I had a life change in that regard. The second pivot happened in 2007. We had owned John Maxwell's assets, and we were putting on these big events. It was around 2010, to be honest. 2010, big events. 185,000 people at one of my events.
Wow.
And you think 185,000 people, this crazy, big, monstrous. And guess what? A week later, we were just a memory. And there was just, because they were going on to the next thing. And I realized for me, it's like, no. I want to be a part of transformation and multiplication. I want to be a part of helping become significant to people. So I had this big aha, which is, progress is a process. It's not an event. Progress is not a book. Progress is not an event. Even though I write books, even though I do events and such, but we create process for people, because that's the only way people change. They change over time. More so, some of us can say, hey, a book changed my life or an event changed my life. Yes, that's a small percentage. The majority of us is progress as a process.
And one of the things I'm finding, and I was talking about it earlier today, and you just mentioned the word, through the coaching that I'm doing with clients, is that what's happening, in the world at the moment, which is a very kind of changed place with everything going on with the coronavirus. But one of the interesting things that I'm finding with my clients is that, they're actually questioning themselves and questioning what they're doing. And there's that debate about, well, am I making a living? Am I making a life? And is what I'm doing really having any significance? And you touched on that.
In my opinion, we're in a completely new era. It was all set up, and this shocked us. It shocked the world how fast this came on. Well, what it's going to do, literally, it's going to restart a new era. And the new era, if you think about the 20th century, it was coming off the 19th century. It took a depression in the United States that led to a global slowdown, but it ushered in the new era of the 20th century was mass weaponization brought on by the Industrial Revolution. In the 21st century, technology has been happening since the 80s, but it's just now becoming the 21st century. This era is ushering in. So what is happening is people are going to be shocked. Companies are going to basically be the great reset. This is a resetting. So therefore, every leader has to reset. They have to ask these questions, because we're going to be, let's just say, the new norm, whenever that is. That's going to be a brand new startup season. Every company has to reevaluate their vision, their mission, their values, to go, what were we really doing? Is it still valuable? Is it still vital? So I just think you're on to something to go, absolutely. Every single leader should be asking those questions, because that's the times that we're in.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting, because if you think about the last kind of major global event was kind of the 2008, the market, everything that went and what happened in that. And my view, I mean, not that it's based on anything very scientific, but just based on what I'm seeing, is that this will have a much more seismic impact in terms of change. Would you agree with that or disagree?
100%, because the 2008 and 9 was in a specific market. It was in the sector of the mortgage and banking and so on and so forth, which is massive. This has I've been saying it's like a storm. Is this a 3-wave tsunami or a 5-wave tsunami or a 20-wave tsunami? You think about the tsunami that hit Japan, that was 20 waves. So the first tidal wave is the coronavirus. That knocks everyone out because of fear, because of quarantine. Well, that is a global slowdown in of itself because of the trickle-down effect of what people aren't spending money on, which then leads to the layoff of the second wave, which is already happening. I think by mid-April in America, the second wave will hit, which is the mass layoffs. Then there's going to be a third wave. And if there's not, this is my opinion, if there's not a vaccine, if there's not any hope of that, then there could be 2 more strong waves probably in June. And that then leads to what would be a depression. And that depression, it's interesting. I was reading about the depression recently, and in America, I think it was close to 20% of the workforce in America in the 1930s didn't have a job. Well, that did mean that 80% still had a job, but it was a different lifestyle for a season, right? And that's what I mean by the Great Reset. I think globally, this is a great reset, and this reset is going to be significant, which means that all of us have to use ingenuity and have to pivot and learn to lead in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I find the other thing I find interesting is that some of my work is with some very major global companies. And I was having a conversation with the senior directors on one last week, and he was saying, because they're not immediately impacted by the what's going on. I mean, economically, the business is going on and continues on, and that's it. Right. And he was saying, actually, strangely, in terms of the work that he's doing and the division that he leads, that the previous couple of weeks, they probably had one of the most productive times they've had when everybody is at home. And he said, strangely, he said that. So now he said, we're beginning to question, well, why have we got huge office blocks in the major cities, the Fifth Avenues, the Champs-Élysées, places like that are costing an arm and a leg? And do we need them?
That's what I mean. That will reset everything. It will reset commercial real estate.
Yeah.
It will reset because the number of people, now, not everyone, there's be a lot of people who will go back to the old ways,
sure,
but there'll be 20, 30% who will think that way, which will have a trickle-down effect on the way that we work in the future. So I think the reality is that the great reset is that people will be thinking differently. They have to be. So they're going to be thinking about how teams aligned. We have a flywheel that we use for teams, and the teams are basically the idea of maximizing team performance has to be around communication, relationship, alignment, execution, and capacity. Well, in the new world, people are figuring out how remote you can do communication and relationship. It's just very different. So the idea of learning hybrid remote and when and how you do it, it will totally change. But you have to focus on relational trust at the core of everything. And I think that's where a lot of people are afraid of the remote piece, because I don't know what you're doing when you're at home. Are you really working? Are you not working? And so we have a number of tools that we use to help people to become as most productive as they possibly can be. But it is a mind shift. And that mind shift is going to be happening to 25, 30% of the companies are going, like you said, why are we paying for this overhead? We can be way more productive without it.
One of the things, just when you're talking about remote working, and one of the challenges, I mean, obviously people, how people work and how they organize themselves and set themselves up is one part. But for leaders of teams, it's a slightly different challenge. I mean, it's the discipline of how they do their own work, but how do they engage their team, motivate their team without just being on, Zoom calls all day long?
Yeah. So we have a framework. It's called the 5 gears, and it's blowing up right now in a positive way because it really works. It's a sign language that you use for teams, and it goes like this. It's based on a manual stick shift. A car needs all gears every day. You can't be in the same gear. Well, 5th gear is focus mode. 4th gear is multitask. 3rd gear is social. second gear is connect, and first gear is recharge. So if you think about your team members in a remote setting, they need every gear every day. Fourth gear would be Zoom calls all day long. It would just be back to back to back to back to back. What we realize is a lot of teams haven't understood they need the fifth gear focus. So if you said to me, hey, Jeremy, I'm in fifth gear for 2 hours. I know you're working on a project. I'm not going to bother you. Mm-hmm. So it's okay. So by using this sign language, you might just hold up, or just tell me, hey, I'm in fifth gear. I now know the common language with you. I can put it on the calendar. Great. You're working on a project. Awesome. We're making progress. So what's happening is people are adjusting to work at home. That means they're in fourth gear. They're multitasking. So they have to establish, what does third gear look like remotely, which is social? Well, a lot of teams we're working with, they're creating a 1 hour coffee. Hey guys, we're just going to talk, or we're going to do lunch together. And we do lunch and like, hey, what's going on? What are you watching? How's your, and you just talk, chit chat, small talk. First gear is recharge. Maybe during lunch, you need to go in your backyard and read a book, or you need to work out for an hour over lunch. But what you're doing is you're putting these gears into a calendar, and the team leader is then defining the culture by helping people get into the right gear at the right time. So that's one example that people can use.
That's a great process, and that's very helpful, because I think that leaders are struggling with kind of getting that balance right, because the bit that's missing from being in the office, one of the things that's missing is the social aspect. So how do you try and recreate that, which kind of in the office can be a bonus and can be a pain in the neck, because it can be a distraction, but you actually do need some of that. No, that's really, really helpful. One of the case studies that you referred to on your site, and I can't remember the name of the organization, but it was actually about that they needed leaders, but they needed them upskilled really, really fast. And I said the name, and the name doesn't matter really. But how do you actually really upskill leaders fast? I mean, that sounds a very challenging thing for me to embark upon.
So the idea, we call it multiplying magic. Okay, so you have magic inside of you. What is the magic that you want to transfer? When people die, they're really good at transferring their gold. They're really bad at transferring their magic, which is what makes them really good. So if a leader defines the culture, then the leader needs to create an intentional transfer plan. What do I need to upskill? Is it an emotional intelligence? Is it an actual leadership skill? So at Giant, we focus on really helping people understand their personality so that we know the code to help communicate more effectively. Then we look at what do we want to transfer? Is it knowledge, wisdom, skills? Who is it? When and how? And we have a process, and by doing that, we just organize it and make it more intentional. And we just found intentional multiplication happens where accidental multiplication is osmosis. You hope that they pick it up. They rarely do. So it's a skill set.
So how do you then, so you go into an organization and you've got the business owner, the CEO, whoever it is, the leader of the team, and you map out that process. But I mean, one thing is actually mapping out the process and giving the tools. The second thing is actually the person understanding how to roll that out. How do you help them do that?
We have an apprenticeship square that we train people on. And it's basically the idea of they're clueless when they begin with you, and they don't know they're clueless. And then, unconscious incompetence, right. And then they move through, right? But we have this little flywheel, or not a flywheel, it's a little, it's a square. And what happens is we go from clueless, and then all of a sudden they're aware that they're clueless. And then there's this pit of despair that the leader has to keep them from going into. That pit of despair is when they climb downstairs and they realize that they're a failure and they're not going to make it. So they join other people down in the pit of despair, grab their cup of coffee, and talk about the leader who pushed them into the pit of despair. So it's a subculture of people who are faking it until they're making it, but they're not making it. And so what we do is we're trying to get people to conscious confidence as fast as possible. Well, there's an exercise and a process that you can go through. Some of that is a methodology, some of that is a style, but what it really is, we use the concept called the Sherpa on Mount Everest. So the idea is that you're climbing and you're helping others climb. You're performing and you're helping others perform. So that means that you have to be a healthy in order to help them get to the next level. So there's a whole process we write about in 100X Leader that actually takes people to go, I'm going to fight for their highest possible good. And that is part of the journey that we take people on.
Okay. I mean, in your book, the 100X X Leader, one of the things that you mentioned in there, and it kind of fascinates me, and I'm just wondering why you think it happens, is, you know, in organizations, you know, people all say, yes, we need to develop leaders. And, you know, everybody will put their hand up and say, I absolutely agree with that. But the reality is it doesn't happen all that often, or it doesn't happen as often as it should. So it's not a lack of knowledge. Why is it, do you think, that we don't develop the leaders that we should? Because we've great intention of when it comes to hiring, and we put a lot of time and effort into the process of hiring. But when we get in, that seems to at times go out the window.
Yeah, it is such an issue. I think it's the accidental nature of most leaders. Most people hire people and hope that they're fine. The best way to explain it is that most employees are like plants, and you get a brand new plant. Oh, this one's great. Look, you take the card and you throw the card away about how to build and develop them. Well, every employee needs water, sunlight, and soil. But most leaders line all the plants up and they water them all the same. The reality is each one's different. And if you want to be a green thumb, it takes work to be a green thumb in the garden. It takes work to be a leader worth following. The problem is most people don't, because they get worn out by making the donuts every day. My clients, all my to-do lists, my boss, blah, 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 blah. And so therefore we don't think I'm the Sherpa, I'm responsible for helping them get to the next level. So what it is, it's a mind shift. They go, oh, it's not just them. You know, most people have a plant that or an employee that doesn't work, and then they go, oh, plants these days, you know, millennials, whatever the excuse is. It's not. It's actually the responsibility lies with you, the leader, and the plant itself. The employee wants to grow and you want it to grow. So there's some planning that has to take place, and that's the mind shift.
Yeah. And we're talking about that personal growth. I mean, when it comes to personal growth, okay, I, as the individual, I've got a responsibility. My boss has also got the responsibility. My organization has also got the responsibility. I sometimes wonder, how do you get all those three to work together? Because they very often don't.
Well, we focus on subculture. We go, let's not worry that a lot of people spend too much time talking about the overall culture. Our view is the subcultures inside, which is a team inside companies. Let's say you have 60 subcultures. It's the subculture leader's responsibility to develop that subculture. If that subculture rises and actually starts moving the flywheel, all those flywheels start spinning, it will boil up and it will make that culture thrive. Now, you do want the leader to give an umbrella culture. This is what we believe. But I've just found there's a lot of minutia that you have to work through, that it's the subculture leader. If you get a strong subculture leader, that team can really, really hum, and that team can thrive. So that's our view of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I you know, again, working with a lot of kind of global organizations, and you know, people within the organization will say, "Oh, well, our culture is such and such," or we say it is, but it isn't. You know, but so what can I do, and how can I impact? And I say, well, listen, you know, the only thing you can do is impact the space you operate in.
Amen. That's it, right there. That's
You know.
exactly it. Control what you can control.
Absolutely, and I think you can. The other thing, and you touch on it there, is mindset. And I often hear the comment, "Oh, I'd love to shift the mindset of my team." And I'm sure it's a comment that you've heard time and time again. How do you shift the mindset, or do you shift the mindset?
So we believe that people will only change when they see that they have broccoli in their own teeth. If I tell you you have broccoli in your teeth, you're going to point the broccoli at my teeth. But if I can show you, so what we've done is we've created mirrors. We create visual tools in common language in a form of a mirror, so that if I look in the mirror, I go, oh my gosh, how long has that been there? 20 years. What? 20. And so what happens is, to do that, then the leader has to be transparent, and the leader has to go on a journey. So we have about 65 mirrors, and they're in every category of social, emotional intelligence, leadership skills, personality. And each time it's a different view. And I go, I've got 28 pieces of broccoli in my teeth. Interesting. I take one out, take one out. When the leaders, other people see that the leader's taking them out, they're more prone and open. But if I tell you to do something, but I'm not willing to do it, that hypocrisy is what shuts down mindset and mind shift. And hypocrisy is the biggest issue in leadership.
Yeah, it's that gap between what I say and what I do. And that becomes,
Credibility and
yeah.
integrity gap.
And you know, I think that it is that credibility gap, and I think that's huge. In this at this period of time, if you look, and I know I'm not asking you to look into a crystal ball and create the future, because who the hell can do that at any given time, but particularly right now. But if you were talking to many kind of leaders listening to this, they're business owners or leaders in their own divisions, whatever. What are the three things that you say to them? Okay, in this current environment and looking at the next 12 months, these are the things that you should really be focusing in on. What would the three be?
So if I'm a leader of a team, if I'm a leader of an organization, I might say it a little differently versus if I'm a leader of a team. Let's say a leader of a team, I'm basically going, I want to make sure that my team is completely set up, that I'm supporting them, but I'm also holding them accountable, support and challenge. And I've got my team set up in the right cultural dynamic. So we're not scurrying, we're hustling. So what do we do together, and how do we get everyone on the same page? So I want to make sure they're set up. That's short term. Long term, I'm basically going, I'm rethinking everything. I mean, I would be looking at your entire vision, your mission, your metrics, but I would be doing it from your avatars. Think about your clients. What are they going through right now? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What's their process? What can you do to respond to them, to serve them, to help them? What can you do to pivot and build? So we've created a whole process called Quarantined, and going, hey, we've created content and processes and things. Any quarantined team who wants help, we've given free resources that are available for people. Well, that's our pivot on the fly to help people in this season. We're building a whole transition suite because of the amount of transitions that's going to happen around the world. And we want to give them relevant resources in a 21st century way. We're already building that. That's in the can coming up in the next few weeks. So those are things we've done to respond. What do you do if you're a team leader to really, really respond? So we have a session called a battle map. We created a battle map that says, here's survive, here's thrive. Survive is what are the things I need to do to plan? My contingency planning. What do I need to do to stabilize our business? I want to get my team on those. Then I want to move over to thrive. What do I need to do to respond to the avatars that I'm working with, our clients? And then what do I want to build in the future? And I bet you're going to pivot and do things completely different than you were doing in February.
Great advice. Absolutely great advice. Before I ask you to share with us how people can get in touch with you and kind of get at those resources that I think people will be chaffing at the bit to actually get at, a question I love asking, particularly as somebody who is a prolific author like you, a book other than your own that has made an impact upon you, and why?
Well, so I read biographies. And I found myself, I used to read every business book under the sun. I read biographies because they give me perspective on history. So what I've done I was reading, it was fascinating that I've started reading 3 sets of Dwight Eisenhower. And I thought, how funny that I started reading those in February. How interesting, because now it's really helpful because of how he dealt with the wave and the issue of World War II, how he dealt with the Cold War, how he dealt with You know what I mean? So for
Yes.
me, so I'm reading one called Supreme Commander right now by Stephen Ambrose, but it doesn't, it's like the biographer. Who's the best biographer for you? So for me, I just go into historical figures and learn from them. And I find it so enthralling, especially in these days. So find someone who's maybe gone through hard times and learn from them, and it gives perspective. And so that's what I do from a book perspective.
That's great. And rituals, daily rituals. I'm always again fascinated by people's daily rituals because successful people, my experience, the vast majority have them. They're different, but I'm always curious as to what they are.
Yeah. So for me, I know myself, I think fairly well. And when I encourage people, I come alive. So one of my daily rituals is I write one note a day that is meaty to someone in my world. Now, I should say it's probably 5 to 6 days a week. So I'll write almost like a letter. It could be a 2 paragraph, maybe 4 paragraphs. Every once in a while I have to limit it down to a longer text. But I find someone in my world. It's not the same person and I'll encourage them with something that I see in them. We use a phrase at Giant. We call people up, not out. So I call people up to what I see that they could be. And that little ritual for me brings a lot of joy. A couple of reasons. Number one, it feeds me because I'm giving. I usually get something back. That's not why I do it,
Sure.
but I usually get something back, which it means I'm staying connected to people. So especially in this day of remote and quarantined, that could be a daily ritual that you might find can be really, really good.
Yeah, I love that. That's really innovative. Must say I do love that. That's a great one. Jeremy, it's been fantastic to have you on the podcast, and we could go on for a long time. But where can people reach out and connect with you? We'll put everything in the notes, but just if they're listening.
Yeah. So if they want to see what we're doing, it's really simple. It's giant.tv. And that's the simplest way if they want to experience it. If they want to do, I think it's giant.tv/JK. It gives them free season. I think it's 30 days, somewhere in there, to check out what we're doing. If you wanted to, it's jeremiekubicek.com. That'll be in the show notes because most people won't know how to spell that. But if you want to see what we're doing, we do a lot of remote videos and remote work for people. And it's just a fun way to live. But man, it's so good to be with you. Thanks for the time.
Jeremy, thank you. It's been a real honor to have you here. We really appreciate it.